Now, we talked about this didn't we? Last night, Nationals MP Bridget McKenzie and Canavan, this draft or an amendment to the government's Green Bank legislation to allow the investment in nuclear power. Very important because today we hear two-thirds of coalition MPs, including my next guest, they all come out publicly to express support that we lift the prohibition in Australia on nuclear power. Now, explained the history on that prohibition at the top of the show, but to discuss where it is now and what might happen, I'm joined from Canberra by LNP Senator for Queensland, Gerard Rennick. Senator Rennick, great to have you on the show. I think this is such an important issue. All credit for you and to your colleagues as well for breaking cover and wanting at least a debate about this, because for too long we talk about nuclear power, but no one's brave enough to have the debate. What made you push this issue out today?
Good evening, Peter, and thanks for having me on tonight. Look, I've always been in favour of nuclear power. We are the only G20 country in the world that doesn't have a nuclear reactor. Nuclear power is a form of baseload energy. We are the biggest, we have the largest reserves of uranium in the world. It's similar to our coal. It is absolutely nonsensical to export our raw materials and yet not use them ourselves. If we want to get secondary industries and manufacturing back up in this country, we need cheap, reliable baseload power. Now, I'm still a big supporter of coal, but I also am attracted to the notion of having modular reactors that can be used in remote mining camps, in regional areas. So, for example, with coal, obviously you've got to have a larger reactor or a coal-powered fire station, and they're spread further around, so you've got greater transmission, etc. But nuclear gives us another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, to generate baseload energy. And if you look at many of the other countries around the world, like France and Sweden, these guys are some of the biggest users of nuclear power in the world, and they also have competitive manufacturing industries.
And the point you make is so true about the rest of the world, because when you hear, low emission stats quoted back to try and make Australia feel as though it's a pariah on these issues by the Greens and, the hard left of the Labor Party as well here. Of course, they often quote back statistics from countries that have a high penetration of nuclear power. So this foxes out those who say they truly want a lower emissions future. If they want a low emissions future, they've got to back nuclear, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is so ironic that the party that pushes for low emissions the most, the Greens, are the most adamant against nuclear power and hydropower, which is another thing we need to bring into this country, and it's obviously a discussion for another day. But it's extremely hypocritical of the left parties to be opposed to nuclear. And if the Prime Minister is serious about meeting the 2050 net zero emission targets, which I can take it or leave it, I'm not necessarily convinced that global warming's out there and it's a threat to humanity. But if the Prime Minister wishes to pursue this course, he has to go nuclear and a lot more dams. So it's something that's got to be on the table. We are not going to get there purely by wind and solar alone.
And how serious are you and some of your colleagues in making this point to the PM?
Well, look, I'm serious enough to be on here tonight, and speak openly about it. And I think many of the backbenchers feel the same. There was a poll taken on ABC Brisbane just before I was elected back in early 2019, and it asked whether or not people supported nuclear power in the city of Brisbane. So it wasn't regional Queensland, and it was 57 to 43% of people were in favour of it, which shocked me. But I know from doing some door knocking and things like that, whenever we talk about, lowering emissions, while some people were of the view that we should lower emissions, they also supported nuclear power. So I think it's something that we should take to the people. And I believe that there is there's a reasonable chance that close to 50%, if not more, would now support nuclear energy, especially if it meant that we were going to reduce emissions. And
of course we've got... Please finish.
Sorry, you go on.
It just beggars belief, that we have all of these uranium resources, like our coal, like our gas, and we're happy to export them, but we've become very difficult in terms of using them here, and we've got a prohibition, obviously, on nuclear power. It only requires 2 acts to change. So if anyone says it's hard to change it, other than, political stomach, legislative-wise, it's not a hard thing to do. Just quickly, people will have old-fashioned views, I think, about nuclear energy, but modular reactors, you talked about them a little bit there, they're very sophisticated now, aren't they?
Well, look, I'm not an expert, but my belief is they're much more sophisticated than they used to be. But it should also be pointed out that there's been very few deaths from nuclear energy anyway, apart from Chernobyl. I think there was a meltdown on 3 Mile Island back in '78, and then the Fukushima crisis, which was as a result of a tsunami. So the risks of nuclear energy, I think, are overplayed. And I actually put a question on estimates to the Australian Nuclear Organisation here, and it was to do with nuclear waste. And as they replied back to me, a lot of it now is transmuted, which in other words, they recycle it, and it is, the amount of waste is decreasing all the time. And this is something we need to do more of, is more research into how to reduce nuclear waste and how to actually improve energy density. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so against renewables, is that basically the amount of energy isn't that dense at all. And take, for example, in Europe, where they claim that they're using more and more renewable power. 60% of the renewable power used in Europe is from wood chips. I mean, burning wood is going backwards.
You're absolutely right. Biomass, they call it, but it's all smoke and mirrors. I've got to leave it there, Senator Rennick, but you're very welcome to come on the show anytime you want to talk about nuclear power, because I think we've got to keep having this conversation, and I think we underestimate the Australian people for their willingness to look at it.